I know a lot of you already know how to can. This is just kind of for those that don't, maybe a little refresher. The ball canning book is a must-have. You can get those at Walmart for like $13. They're not really expensive. They have all kinds of recipes. They tell you how to can things, how much time you have to can them, things like that. Certain vegetables that you get, like tomatoes, they don't have to go into a pressure canner. Pressure canner is designed for things like beans and squash, things that have little to no acid in them. You have to pressure can them so that they will kill the bacteria that's in them. The canning book will tell you how much. I know Teresa has a different canner than this. Hers has little weights that you put on it. Mine has a digital, not digital, but a little gauge that will tell you when the pressure reaches a certain point. And you have to watch this very carefully or it will blow up. So when I'm canning with this, I usually bring a chair over here and position this so that I can watch it and adjust the temperature on the stove so that I don't have beans or squash all over the ceiling and glass everywhere.
Are glass top stoves great for canning?
Glass top stoves are not good for canning. This one we have used for canning, and this eye here is stuck on high. So the way that I have to regulate it is I have to use my simmer switch on the stove, which cuts the heat off and on. But so far it works, but I've got to order in for a gas top. So I'm sure that will come sometime. Water bath canner, you don't have to worry about that. You fill it with water up to about 3/4 of the way full. Bring it to a boil and it's ready to go. You just put the lid on it when you get your jars in it. Set the timer on your stove or your little timer, and then when it's reached the time that it's supposed to be, like tomatoes, I put those in for about 10 minutes and then I'm done with them. The reason I do them in the water bath canner is most of the tomatoes that you get now don't have enough acid in them to keep them on their own without canning. Years and years ago, when my mother started teaching me to can, tomatoes had a very high acid level in them. And so all you would have to do is heat those and then put them in the jars and then put the lids on them, screw them down and wait for them to seal, and they would keep indefinitely. But because the acid is not what it used to be, I use the water bath canner. When I put my canning water on to bring to a boil, I also put about a tablespoon of vinegar in the water. That keeps your glass jars from becoming cloudy. Over time they'll cloud up and discolor. They're still good, but they're not pretty anymore. So I always use vinegar in that. I have peeled some tomatoes before everybody got here. Those are easy to do. Can you hand me one of those tomatoes? When I can my tomatoes, I usually use a knife like this. I bring hot water to a boil here. I cut an X in the bottom of the tomato. I drop it in the water for 2 or 3 minutes. I lift it out, put it into cold water, and then the skin peels off like nothing. Then you want to core the tomato. If it has, a lot of times different tomatoes, different kinds will have a lot of that really hard core stuff in it. You want to get as much of that out as possible because sometimes that will cause your tomatoes to go bad if it doesn't cook really soft. You don't have to get it all out, but most of it, which is not that hard. And they peel up really pretty, like this. When you get your tomatoes peeled, You put a little bit of water in them. You don't need much, just enough to keep them from sticking to the pan while the juices cook out of the tomatoes. And you want to cook the tomatoes until they're hot all the way through. You don't have to boil them till they're tiny little pieces, but till they're hot all the way through. And then you can start putting them in your jar. Summertime is the best time to get tomatoes to can them. They're everywhere. You can go to a farmer's market. We go to, I got these at Taco Bell because we don't have tomatoes in our garden right now. And they were really reasonable. I bought 2 big baskets of tomatoes like this for $5 a piece, which is cheap for tomatoes. You couldn't go to Walmart and get those.
What is Taco Bell?
It's like a flea market. They have everything, vegetables and tricycles and goats and pigs and dogs. Huh?
When can I go there?
You can go there every Sunday morning. They're open on Sundays only, so which works really great for us. If they were open on Saturdays, we'd miss out. If you decide to plant your own tomatoes, they're really easy to grow. You can plant them in a flower pot, you can plant them in a garden, you can plant them in a flower bed. We buy Better Boy plants, or he'll grow the seeds, or his dad will grow the seeds up for us. A Better Boy plant has the capacity to produce at least 50 pounds per plant. So if you plant it and you fertilize it occasionally, you could possibly produce all the tomatoes that you needed with 2-3 plants, depending on how many you wanted to put up. We generally plant
30 or 40.
30 or 40. One year we had 75, which that year I put up 300 jars of tomatoes, which caused me to say, I just want to put up this year what we used. And when I said that, that's exactly what we got. So I learned my lesson. I was tired, but then I got convicted that Yahweh gave me this year to store food for the future. And He had the ability to make me have more than enough, not only for myself, but to share with other people that maybe didn't have a garden. And I ruined it with the words of my mouth. So I won't say that anymore. If I can't put it up, then I'll find somebody else that can. I prefer canning over freezing for this reason. I have 2 freezers outside, and they're not completely jam-packed full. We've gone through and sorted through. It doesn't keep in the freezer forever. Eventually it'll have freezer burn, or it'll get old or something like that. So I prefer canning for that reason. The other reason is if I have a freezer that's full of stuff and the power goes out, let's say for 2-3 days, depending on the season. The summertime, it might not last that long. But then all my food's gone. With canning, it's in jars and it will last for a long, long time. You know, some people will say, 25 years. Some people will say less than that. I know that my mother and her family just ate the last jars of green beans that my grandmother canned, and she's been dead 16 years. And they were still good. So I prefer canning for that reason. It does take an investment. Jars and lids are not cheap. But once you buy the jars, all you have to do is replace the lids. They also have reusable lids. I don't have any of those. But lids are not that expensive once you've made the investment of the jars. Jars are about $10 a dozen. Sometimes you can find them for a little less, sometimes they're a little more. But on the long haul, I think jars are the way to go. Tomatoes are probably one of the most versatile fruits that you can put up. You can use it in stews, you can use it in spaghetti sauces, Lisa and Conrad made tomato jelly one year. which kind of tasted like strawberry jelly. You can even make strawberry jam out of tomatoes, which is really bizarre, but it can be done. I also use canning salt. I use canning salt. You can use any kind of salt. You can use table salt. You can use kosher salt, but canning salt is, I guess, a more pure kind of salt. With the other salts, sometimes it will make your vegetables a little cloudy. They're still good, they're still salted, all that. This just keeps them clear. Let's see. Pots and pans and things like that. Non-reactive cookware is what you need, which is stainless steel or porcelain. I tried the porcelain, everything scorches in it. I bought this stock pot at Ollie's for $19. I've got a larger stock pot than this that I got at Walmart. I think I paid $54 for it 10 years ago, something like that. And they last forever. I mean, you don't have to worry about them going bad or the inside being scratched up, you know, like a lot of the Teflon coated or whatever that other coating is they put in it. So I suggest stainless steel. I've got several different sizes of stock pots. I've got this size, I've got this size, I've got one that's larger than that. And it's a good investment. It's not that expensive. You know, you buy one and you save up for the next one. The other thing is the things that you need to can. You can get by. I used to get by with getting my jar lids out with a fork, but I had a lot of burnt fingers. This is a little lid lifter. You can reach right in the pot, pick up a lid, put it on your jar, and it'll save your fingers a lot of soreness. When I go to put my jars in a canner, this is awesome. Used to take a dish towel and screw the lids on, and then just pick them up with my fingers really carefully with a dish towel and try to ease them off into the canner. That's terrible too, because you can get burned. This is a couple of dollars. It's not much. It's a great investment. When you're starting to can things like beans or peas or corn or something like this, you stuff the stuff down in the jar with. It's also kind of got a little rule on the end. Some recipes require that you leave space, and this will give you that measurement. After you've done it a while, you can kind of just eyeball it. It's not that big a deal, but this is good to kind of poke the veggies down in there with it. This is another thing. This, when you got to squeeze to tighten the lids on your jars. The jars are extremely hot, and this, you just grab the jar like this, and then you can screw the lid on, which is helpful. All these things I got at Walmart. You can get them at just about any grocery store that sells canning supplies, but to me Walmart has been the most reasonable with their prices. Did I say funnel? No funnel? I like this funnel. You can buy funnels, all different kinds. I've got one like this too. I prefer this one because I'm not a great shot. This gives me a little bit of extra room so that if I get kind of sloppy, it kind of catches some of my mess. It saved me a bunch. Yeah, I buy pickling vinegar. I don't know what the difference is other than it says pickling and canning vinegar. It just seems like that should be what you get. But back to tomatoes. Tomatoes are, I think they're awesome. You can do anything with them just about. These are some examples of things that we put up corn this year. I did it two different ways. I did it where you cut the corn off, and then you blanch it, which is kind of bringing it to a boil and that kind of thing. And then putting it in the jar and then putting it in the pressure canner. And you can this for 90 minutes, which is a long time, but it's worth it. Then I canned it with cold packing it, where you just take the cut off corn, put it in the jar, and put boiling water on it, and then put it in the pressure canner. The cold pack method is by far the best and easiest way. I think with the first where I blanched it, it overcooked the corn. So when it came out of the pressure canner, it was a darker color than this. And this is what corn is supposed to look like, not the other. Squash. Squash is another thing that you can can. I use it in casseroles, soups. We like it boiled with butter and onions and that kind of thing. And most people tell you you can't pressure can corn, but you can. Squash. I'm sorry, squash. You can. We've eaten it for over a year. I've never opened a bad jar of it. This has to be pressure canned because it has no acid in it whatsoever. And if you need that recipe, I can give it to you. It's not in the ball book. We eat a lot of green beans. 2 years ago? 2 years ago, we had green beans coming out our noses. And so I think we put up like 325 jars of green beans. We canned all summer long. Sometimes we plant things that come in at the same time, so it's like fighting fire. But I do not regret it one bit. I don't have to ever go to the grocery store for beans, corn, squash, pickles, tomatoes. We also put up our own sauerkraut. We love it. It doesn't require any canning until the process is over, and then you do it in the water bath canner. I can give you the recipe for that too. If you've got a food processor, it makes it way easier to cut up the cabbages. And then it's salt and a little bit of boiling water, and then you set the jars in a dark place for 14 days. And then they process in a water bath canner for about 5 minutes. So it's not a big deal. But you can build your own pantry up with a lot of things that you grow in your garden. This is some salsa that I put up last year, I think. I can't tell without my glasses on it. Yeah, I'm not looking. It's not that big a deal. I put it up. It's still good. It's still sealed. We put up our own pickle relish. I cheat on this. You've got all kinds of recipes that you can look up. But I dice up the pickles, and then I use a kosher dill mix and pour it in, and that's it. I water bath can this for about 5 minutes too. So canning's really easy. It does take an investment to start. If you can get a gas stove, that's great. If you can't, you can get one like Steve's got out here and do it out in your garage or on your porch or something like that. I wish we had done that and saved this, but you know, we didn't, and I get a new stove. So is there any questions? Well, a lot of times we will pick the tomatoes when they're not fully ripe, because sometimes they might start having a little bit of a bad place on them, or a blossom end rot or something like that. Our chickens get them. Well, we don't do the deer ones. But we set up tables on our deck that's in the sun, and we'll take the tomatoes out there and we'll sort them. Those that are ripe enough to can, we bring in and can them. Then those
How ripe do they need to be?
Hand me one of those. Yeah. I like them to be this red at least, or even redder, as long as they're not squished. squishy, you know, with a lot of bruises. If they've got a bad place on them, I will cut it out. I'll smell it. If you smell a bad tomato, you'll never forget it. They smell gross. So you cut the bad place out, I run it over under water, and then smell it again to make sure it's good. And then I go through the process of cutting the X on it, dipping it in the hot water, and we'll do this one. I dip it in the hot water like this. I leave it for a few minutes. No, I got these tongs. I usually set this in the sink. It drains all the juices out of it. Take it out. Everybody run. And I have a sink full of cold water. We'll just let water run over it. But I usually do 10 tomatoes at a time in the hot water. Then I'll put them in the cold water. And then the peels just peels off like this. It's not a big deal. It's the easiest way to peel tomatoes. Peaches are the same way. A lot of thin skinned fruits are the same way. You just dip them in the hot water and they peel right off.
Why do you have to peel?
Well, you don't have to peel them. Like these diced tomatoes, we had them over at Janet and Benny's and I had a lot of them left over. I brought them home, put them in a pan, brought them to a heat all the way through, threw them in the jars, and they were done in 30 minutes, you know, from beginning to end. If you've got a place like this, you want to make sure you get all of that out because you don't want that. Anyway, if you're going to can them and you want the skins off, then just make sure it's all off. But a lot of people tell you, I grew up being told that you had to have all the skins off of them or your jars would go bad. Now, I've not ever had that issue. It's just something. I have never tried to can a full jar of diced tomatoes, but I don't see why it would be any different than this one. These took a little bit longer to seal than what one of these would. It may be the peel, I don't know. But once you get all your tomatoes peeled, you want to put them in a stock pot, bring them till they get hot, ladle them into your jars, have your water bath canner already going. Also, if you've got a low acid tomato, you can add a teaspoon of lemon juice to it. It doesn't alter the taste of the tomatoes, but it also gives it that extra acid that it might need to keep it, you know, hold it over some more. You can add things to your tomatoes when you're canning them, like if you want a soup mix, you might want to put squash and okra and whatever else you like in a soup mix. And then I would use the pressure canner to can that because you have those low acid vegetables in with it. But your ball canning book will tell you how long. I don't remember right off the top of my head how long that is, but most of the things that I've canned just require 10 pounds of pressure for, you know, 25 minutes or 30 minutes or something like that. So it's simple. Once you get over the fear of the pressure canner, it's not that big a deal. You just got to watch it really good. So, any other questions?
Are you going to fill the jars?
Once you fill a jar and you set it in the water bath canner, how long will it stay in there?
With tomatoes, only 10 minutes. And then also, I put a dish towel over here when I get my hot jars out of the canner and set it on the towel so it doesn't come in contact with a cold countertop. Because sometimes that'll make your jars pop, and not in a good way. I have had flawed jars before and had them break in the canner. But usually you just have one or two, and you can tell when you lift the jar up with that lifter whether it's it's broken or not. You'll feel a kind of a pull on the bottom of the jar. That makes you really sad because you worked really hard for that. But most of the time I check my jars beforehand to make sure I don't have any chips or cracks or deep scratches in them. If you use metal utensils pushing things down in your jars, sometimes it'll scratch the inside of the jar and you won't even realize it, and it'll be flawed before you even start canning with it the next time. So that's where this little thing comes in handy. I also use a ladle for any kind of soupy stuff like tomatoes or beans where you got to have hot water and stuff in it. So a nice big fat ladle works great. Anything else?
Very good.
Yay!